Dear students, we shall continue with chapter 13, Organisms and Populations, part 7. The topic is population interaction. In nature, all the living organisms do not live in isolation or do not live alone. They have to interact with one another in various ways, forming interactive linkage within the community. So this is known as population interaction. Population interaction may be interspecific or intraspecific. Intraspecific interaction is the interaction between the same species. An interaction between two lions will be an example of intraspecific interaction. An interspecific interaction is the interaction between different species. Interaction between tiger and lion will be an example of interspecific interaction. So interspecific interaction can be beneficial, it can be harmful, or it can be neutral. Now let us go to different types of population interaction. The first population interaction is predation. In this kind of population interaction, one organism called the predator kills and eats another organism called prey. Predation is an important process because it is through this process the energy is transferred from one trophic level to the another, and it is through this process the prey population is kept at optimum level. In the absence of predators, the prey population increases, which can cause instability in ecosystem. Let us take an example. In Australia in early 1920, a prickly pear cactus were introduced. Within a short span of time, the cactus started spreading into millions of hectares in the absence of predator. And finally, it was brought under control by bringing cactus feeding moth from the natural habitat where the cactus belong. But when the predator becomes very efficient, means when the population of predator become high, it overexploits the prey population, leading to extinction of prey species. And at the same time, the predator population will also become extinct due to the lack of food. Let us go to the next one, that is competition. Darwin's theory of organic evolution clearly states that interspecific competition is a potent force which results in survival of fittest organisms in nature in the struggle for existence. So it can also be defined as a process in which the fitness of one species is significantly lower in the presence of another species. So competition takes place between individuals of the same species. And at the same time, it also takes place between unrelated species or different species. For example, flamingo visiting South America lakes compete with the fish of the lake for common food. Flamingo is a kind of bird. They compete with the fish of the lake for food, that is zooplanktons. Intraspecific competition are of two basic types. The first one is resource competition. In resource competition, the resources are subdivided into small parts and to which its competing species have access. So in resource competition, the resources are divided into small parts and each of the competing species have access to these resources. The second one is interference competition. in interference competition, the feeding efficiency of one species limits the efficiency of another competing species, even when the resources are available. So even when the resources are available in abundance, if the feeding efficiency of one species is high, then that feeding efficiency of that species will limit the feeding efficiency of another species. Another example of competition in nature comes from what is called competitive release. It says that a species whose distribution is restricted in a very small area tend to expand their distribution over a large geographical area in the presence of superior competitive species. So in the presence of superior competitive species, the species that are restricted to a small area tend to move and expand their distribution over a large geographical area. Cornell's elegant field experiment showed how superior and large-sized barnacles called balanas competitively excluded the smaller inferior barnacles called Tadalamas from the intertidal zone of rocky sea coast of Scotland. Gause competitive exclusion principle state that two closely related species, while competing for the same resources, cannot coexist indefinitely. So the two different species competing for the same resource, they can coexist for a short time but cannot coexist indefinitely, even if other ecological factors remain constant. Here the inferior competitors is eventually eliminated out. Now let us go to next population interaction, that is parasitism. In parasitism, the host always suffers and the parasite always benefited. The parasite that feed on the external surface of the host organism are called ectoparasite. Example is mosquito. They suck the blood from the human body, from the external surface of the host. And the parasite that live inside the host are called endoparasite. You can see the picture. Worm that is living and deriving nutrition from inside the host body is an example of endoparasite. Brood parasitism in birds is a very fascinating example of parasitism. Here, the parasitic bird lays its eggs in the nest of its host and allows the host to incubate them. During the course of evolution, the eggs of parasitic birds have attained similar resemblances of the host eggs, which allowed their eggs to be incubated by the host and prevent detection and rejection as foreign eggs. So Koel is an example of parasitic birds. So Koel, a parasitic bird, lays their eggs on the crow's nest. Since the egg of Koel is similar to the eggs of crow, the crow could not recognize the foreign egg and incubate them. Another population interaction is commensalism. So it is a kind of population interaction where one is benefited and the other is neither harmed nor benefited. Example, orchid growing as epiphyte in mango tree. Here the orchid benefit by living on the branch of a mango tree, but the mango tree doesn't get any benefit from the orchid, or orchid doesn't harm the mango tree. Another example is clownfish hiding among anemone from predators. Here the smaller fish are the clownfish. They go together with the anemone fish and hide themselves from predators. So in this interaction, the clone fish benefited, okay, by hiding from the predators. But the anemone fish doesn't get any benefit from the clone fish. Another one is amensalism. Amensalism is a kind of population interaction where one species is harmed, whereas the other species is unaffected. Yes, one species is harmed and the other remain unaffected. Example is the black walnut tree secrete a chemical from the roots, and this chemical harm the neighboring plants. So here the neighboring plants harmed, but the black walnut tree remain unaffected. The next one is mutualism. Mutualism is a kind of population interaction where both the interacting species are benefited. In this interaction, both the species are benefited. Example is lichen. You can see the picture of lichen. Now, lichen is a symbiotic association between algae and fungi. In lichen, the fungi will provide all the raw materials necessary for the algae to perform photosynthesis. So the algae will use that raw materials and perform photosynthesis and produce food. So this food will be utilized by fungi as well. So here both algae and fungi benefit from each other. Another example is pollination. During pollination, the insects, okay, or the pollinators derive nectars from the flower and at the same time pollinate the plant, which is a very important process of reproduction. So that's all about population interaction. Thanks for watching.